So, good morning, OP Singh sir. This is Dr. Amir from NIDM.
Hi, good morning.
OP Singh sir, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay. And am I visible? Okay.
You are correct.
Is it all right?
Slightly you are out of focus. कैमरे को adjust करना पड़ेगा. बहुत clear नहीं है picture आपका.
अब ठीक है?
नहीं, बहुत ज़्यादा clear नहीं है. Picture तो आ रहा है, but बहुत ज़्यादा sharp नहीं है. अब better है. Better हो रहा है.
Yes. Actually, कैमरा गंदा होगा. कैमरे का लेंस गंदा होगा.
हाँ, ऐसा हो सकता है.
उसको थोड़ा सॉफ्ट कपड़े रुमाल वगैरह किसी चीज से साफ कर लीजिए एक बार. हाँ, वो फिंगरप्रिंट्स वगैरह आ जाते हैं टच करने से. एक बार रुमाल से साफ कर लीजिए.
साफ कर लेता हूँ.
सिंह साहब, एक बार रुमाल वगैरह से साफ कर लीजिए.
हाँ,
फिंगरप्रिंट्स आ जाते हैं.
मैं साफ कर लेता हूँ.
And good morning to ED sir as well. Welcome to the webinar, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. Welcome this program to OP Singh ji. I'm ED and IDM.
Yes. Thank you so much, General Bindal.
Nice of you to join us. And Dr. Ravi Sinha ji.
Good morning, General Bindal.
How are you?
Oh, doing fine.
How are you?
It's really great to see the fantastic initiative of NIDM to have so many webinars and making sure that disaster management is being brought to the forefront through these efforts. So it's really great effort by NIDM team under your leadership.
We are all now restricted to our homes or restricted in our lifestyle due to a disaster. So this particular time, we should talk about disaster as much as possible, because after this, no one is going to listen to this point. It will just become one of those things to be could know things. Right now, it is a should know. So we must make use of it and try to disseminate disaster management related issues to as many as possible. And welcome Vineet sir for coming on this program.
Thank you.
And Professor Mahua Mukherjee will be joining, Dr. Amir?
Yes, she is there, but she has just went out for a while. She was there. I spoke in the morning, so I'm just contacting her. So asking her to be joining.
Okay.
सिंह साहब का फोकस अभी अच्छा नहीं आ रहा है.
नहीं आ रहा है. Actually, I'm in the hills, so that's a disadvantage with me. The connectivity is not very clear.
शायद वो भी ये भी सकता है कि कैमरे का जो रेजोल्यूशन है वो उतना अच्छा ना हो, तो इसलिए शायद you can try back camera or front camera. थोड़ा switch off करके देखिए. कैमरा फ्रंट कैमरा या बैक कैमरा लेके. कई बार बैक कैमरा जो होता है वो ज्यादा अच्छा उसका रेजोल्यूशन होता है. नहीं, अभी ठीक आ रहा है सर.
सर उसको बस सेट कर दीजिए, फिर हिलाइए मत एकदम. आप ही मत हिलिए, मतलब वो जगह इतनी सेट हो जाए. क्योंकि मोबाइल का वो फील्ड ऑफ व्यू थोड़ा कम होता है.
Welcome Mahua Mukherjee ji to this webinar. Mahua ji, can you hear? You have to unmute. Sir, shall we start?
Yes.
Okay, I take this opportunity to all the panelists and devotees who are attending this webinar, as well as the participants of this webinar. So we are observing this 60th anniversary of Delhi's 6.0 magnitude, which occurred on this date in 1960. So Delhi is facing a lot of seismic activity of late, and you know that in the history, if you see, there are several significant earthquakes which had impacted Delhi as well. And we are utilizing today's opportunity to observe this anniversary of this earthquake to discuss about building earthquake resilience in urban context. So this is the issue which we are going to discuss over next few hours. And you know that urban resilience is the buzzword of late, where we are talking a lot about climate resilient cities and all these things. But very little discussion is revolving around earthquake resilience. And you see that earthquakes are really big challenge. And when a big earthquake is striking in urban areas like Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, or those smaller capital cities in northeast, or say Srinagar or Dehradun, so it's really going to be quite devastating. And what we have observed in the past, say in Bhuj earthquake, it was really a big challenge to revive the system. So urban resilience basically is the capacity of individual communities, institutions, business, and systems within the city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kind of disaster or hazards it's going to face. So this is basically the building the capacity of the city to bounce back almost every sphere of development or life of the city. So what to do for this? So resilience is not making development a new way to achieve the resilience. So you have to do whatever you are doing, but with the perspective of developing disaster related facilities within the city. So what you have to do is you have to make the city's infrastructure, services, and all those things which are life supporting system disaster safe. How to achieve this? You have to go for city planning as well as include the engineering aspects to be incorporated in all these things. There are large number of programs which have already been started at the international level for resilience building. But as I told earlier, majority of them are for climate resilient cities. Definitely that is an important aspect, but we shall not neglect the earthquake resilience building within the city environment. Unless we are making a city smart and resilient, we are not going to survive a big shock of that earthquake. So we have to do this. So a resilient city, what is a resilient city? A resilient city is one that has developed all those capacities over a period of time to bounce back, to cope up, to absorb those shocks. So we have to develop all those capacities within our system. And how to do this? What are the other characteristics of a resilient city? You have to have aware society, which can identify the risk, which is having sufficient knowledge. So on this parameter, we have to see that how our cities are of late having this aware society for say earthquake risk mitigation. Considering the case of Delhi, when we are living in unauthorized colonies and slums, and what every sort of developmental practices have been followed with the due respect to all those development planners, with little knowledge of earthquake safety measures in our built form. So I'm not sure that how aware our societies are. If they are aware, are they incorporating that awareness into our built environment? And are we using those awareness, whatever awareness which is there in the system for their benefit, for safeguarding against hazards like earthquakes or floods? Then what is the coping mechanism? Can we absorb that shock which is going to be created by an earthquake in city environment? Are we adapting so many things in our system? A few weeks back, or last over a period of time, we have discussed about urban flooding in Delhi. So you see, you take the hazard and you see that adaptation is missing. So knowledge is there, people are keen as well, system is there, but Are we making our system conducive to absorb those shocks? So this is a big challenge, and ultimately what we have to do is we have to transform the system so that policies, investments, and everything should go for making our system disaster safe or disaster resilient environment, built environment basically. So what are few of the characteristics before I just conclude my opening remarks? It should be city should be efficient. City should be or urban environment should be efficient, diverse, redundant. Redundancy we have to create almost every sphere of development, like say communication, say power. These are the essential services over which we have over dependence over the time. I don't know how we have to cope up in case of big earthquake destroying our communication network, and the system which has evolved over a period of time. We have developed those transmission towers, transmission towers in unauthorized colonies over unauthorized houses. So this is a big challenge. We have to develop that redundancy for not only for communication but power, for water supply, for sanitation, for every sphere of life. Then we have to develop physical and social connectivity. We have to think about those aspects as well. Then we have to develop the system flexible to absorb all those shocks. So resilience is a different ball game, and unless we come together, we develop a system where every one of us is dealing with the disaster risk mitigation, we can't achieve this resilience in the urban context. So this is in brief about this. So as far as today's system is today's webinar is concerned, we have planned several discussions today. We are starting with the keynote address by ED NIDM, and then Govt sir will talk about the earthquake in Delhi and what the scenario or some impact if same magnitude earthquake is repeating again in the present scenario. So how urban centers are going to cope up with that. Then Professor Mohua Mukherjee is going to posing the challenge of developing urban resilience in the current scenario. Then Professor Ravi Sinha is going to talk about something about how our housing and infrastructure and all those things which the issues I raised, how to develop all those things resilient and safe against a big earthquake in urban context. Then O.P. Singh sir is having a wide experience, and he is going to talk how we are prepared for responding the situation. Suppose we develop a robust system, but definitely there is a need for effective response in the system. So we are going to talk about our level of preparedness, and O.P. Singh sir is one of the major stakeholder in shaping up the response capacity at national level. So he is going to talk about that. So with this brief introduction, now I request our Executive Director, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal Saab, to give a keynote address. So just in brief, let me introduce Bindal Saab as well. He is commissioned into the Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985. So he is a senior professional working with this, and we are definitely benefiting with his wide range of experience and all this. His experience and his professionalism, and he's shaping, as Ravi Sinha sir mentioning in the beginning, giving a definite direction to NIDM, and we are definitely moving leaps and bounds in achieving our targets and goals. So he's an alumnus of the National Defense Academy. Mr. Bindal is basically a graduate of the Defense Services Staff College and has attended the prestigious High Command course at the Army War College as well. So I'm not talking much about Bindal Saab. Many of you are already aware about him. So Bindal Saab is having international experience as well. So he served United Nations Peacekeeping Mission in Mozambique and served as the Director Center for United Nations Peacekeeping in New Delhi as well. So with this brief introduction, I request Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, AD sir, to give his opening as well as keynote address. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Amir Ali Khan. First of all, congratulations for holding this webinar on earthquake-related issues on the 60th anniversary of the 6.0 Delhi earthquake of August 27, 1960. I heartily welcome Sri O.P. Singh ji, former DG NDRF and UP Police, Professor Ravi Sinha, Professor Mahua Mukherjee, and Dr. Vineet Gehlawat to this forum, and all the esteemed and all the participants who have joined together to learn from each other and to listen to the eminent experts on relevant issues. We are aware that the August 27, 1960 earthquake, the epicenter was somewhere near Delhi and Gurgaon, so more towards the cantonment area. Initially, it was designated as a 6.0, but later it was scaled down to 4.8 magnitude, and the tremors were felt all across Rajasthan also. Large number of buildings, including Red Fort, Rashtrapati Bhavan, they developed hairline cracks and many other things. Even though the deaths were less, I think it was just about 3 deaths. That too, 1 or 2 of them who leaped out of a tall building. Injuries were quite a lot, about 100 plus, due to the falling debris. But that was an earthquake which was instrumental in bringing an earthquake resilience, earthquake resistant structure mentality into the policymakers. Because over a period we have seen that rapid urbanization has been one of the most prominent features worldwide in the post-industrial evolution, where most of the, it is estimated by 2050, more than 70% of the population will be living in urban areas. As on today, it is just about 31.2% population. But if that is the rate of increase, will be the rate of urbanization. That will be the rate of construction and associated accessories and other facilities that will come for every resident who will migrate to urban areas. And in the urban areas too, the metro cities attract the maximum attention. Maximum migrant population comes there. So there is an unprecedented growth in these areas. So excessive urbanization of metros, it has resulted in greatly increased vulnerability of major disasters, both natural and human induced. And even natural disasters have different ramifications when they occur in urban areas due to high population of the density. So added to this is the dangers of fires, buildings collapse. So vulnerability of urban areas requires new dimensions. And in that, when we add the earthquake, for which we are not prepared as of today, it is a totally different ballgame. This particular city, Delhi, we are talking about since today, it is to mark that anniversary. It's a home to over 14 million people, one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world. It is situated next to a river, and it is threatened by earthquake generated by tectonic collisions of India and Asia. This area contains an amalgam of buildings, old and new, illegally built and well designed. Also, some and humble brick houses, gleaming new high rises. So it's a total mix of different type of architecture, different types of construction. Not all of them are earthquake resistance. Most of them are vulnerable to earthquake damage. So this earthquake risk of Delhi is growing significantly. But there is hope of reversing this trend, and that is what we are going to discuss today. Delhi already falls in the seismic zone 4, where 5 is the highest. And considering many day-to-day problems of Delhi, traffic, environmental pollution, water, power shortage, so this seismic risk has not drawn that attention that it deserves. The seismic risk has not drawn the attention that it deserves. And that is why the need is to hold such webinars on earthquake resilience, urban resilience, resilient infrastructure, time and again to drive home this issue that most death and destruction in an earthquake are caused by collapse of man-made construction and not by the secondary effect of the earthquake. since the mankind we have known we cannot predict earthquake. There is no science developed as on today which can predict an earthquake except to give a few seconds of warning, which is not enough. So the only option that we have is to build houses and other facilities to survive the earthquake. So the engineers, they play a very major role in ensuring that new constructions are earthquake resistant. Today itself on this forum, we have IIT professors who will be speaking to us. And they also have to ensure that the existing structures are retrofitted so that they can withstand earthquake shaking as per the original construction. So the first code of practice for earthquake design was developed in India in early 1930s after the 1935 after that Quetta earthquake. So Bureau of Indian Standards developed its first code on seismic design in 1962. That was after the 1935 Quetta earthquake. So building codes, BIS codes are existing in India since early time, but there is no legal framework that ensures that all constructions must implement seismic code provision. And that is a result that most buildings may not meet the coding requirements of seismic resistance. And so this governance issue of implementing the BIS codes is a major gap in our routine work, and that needs to be addressed. The next is the response factor, which Shri O.P. Singh ji will be talking about, is during an earthquake, the response is limited to rescue and relief. Whereas I have seen in Bhuj earthquake, we were limited in our response and rescue and relief work by the heavy machinery that is required. Because in urban areas, when a multi-story building collapses, it is humanly impossible for a JCB to lift that concrete, or it is humanly impossible for the tile cutter to cut through the concrete. For that, you require specialized heavy machinery which needs to be provisioned, which needs to be made available so that a lot of lives can be saved. We could not save many lives in Bhuj because we didn't have those 50-ton cranes or 30-ton cranes who could lift that whole slab of the roof because the building was made so well that the slab could not be broken. And we could save the lives underneath. And the tremors, which aftershocks, which came further compounded that effort. So this provision of heavy machinery is a major shortfall in the response network. It is also required for clearing pathways to reach the locations for evacuation. So we will hear more on this from Shri O.P. Singh ji as it when he speaks. So to sum up, I will say that the economic impacts, political implications, the loss to the population and to the country is huge during if an earthquake hits a metro city of any country, and especially Delhi in particular, being the capital of the country. And so we must ensure that all the new constructions are earthquake resistant, and audit needs to be carried out to identify most vulnerable buildings, and the critical ones should be retrofitted without any loss of time. So with this, I will finish my opening address for the timing, and I'm keen to hear the speakers when they will be speaking in their own turn. I once again welcome all the participants and all the esteemed panelists who have joined for today's webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Amir.
Thank you so much, sir, for nice opening remarks. Definitely, it's a different ball game, and all stakeholders has to play their role in making cities resilient for earthquake risk. So, thank you so much, sir. So, for giving this opening remarks. Now, we are moving ahead and requesting Dr. Vineet Gehlot, sir, for his discussion point on M6.0 Delhi earthquake of August 27, 1960, description of damage pattern and similar things. So before I hand over to Vineet sir, brief introduction of Dr. Vineet Gehlot sir. Gehlot sir is currently working as scientist with the NGRI, but he's basically an alumni of IIT Roorkee, used to be University of Roorkee at that time. So he earned his MTech and PhD degrees from University of Roorkee way back in 1989 and 1995. As I told, he's currently with the NGRI, but before that, he has served the Department of Science and Technology for quite some time. And before that, he was a faculty with the Department of Earthquake Engineering at IIT Roorkee as well. So he's having a very illustrious career, and he has been awarded various awards as well. A few of them are INSA Young Scientist Award in 1997, CSIR Young Scientist Award 2001, and MS Krishna Gold Medal by IGU. So Gallo sir is having a wide range of interest, but his main interest is into developing. He's basically focusing on seismology, and he was instrumental in developing seismological network in Andaman and Nicobar Island. So this is in brief about Gallo sir, and with this brief introduction, I request Gallo sir to take over, and you have around 15 minutes, sir, for your discussion, and then we will see how we have any questions or some reactions from the participants. It's your turn now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Amir Ali sir. Such a generous introduction, and it's fantastic the introduction which Major General Bingal has already given. So he has covered quite a lot of points. So I'll be adding a little bit here and there, whatever he has said. So when it comes to building an earthquake resilient city or buildings, the first thing which should come to anybody's mind is to characterize the earthquake. So, there's something which we keep saying, that know your land. So what do we know about earthquakes which have occurred in this region? How do they occur? Where are those structures on which these earthquakes occur? So in case of Delhi, we should know where are those faults on which these earthquakes occur. We need to know what is the process involved in it. We need to characterize them in terms of their depth, in terms of their magnitude. When it comes to magnitude, what I'm saying is we need to know like how big an earthquake could be, or what is the historical record of earthquake in that region. How big historically, what is the maximum size of earthquake, maximum credible earthquake, what we call. What was the maximum credible earthquake in this region in last, whatever recorded history, whatever we have recorded, or instrument history, whatever we have. So we need to know the history. We need to know the to the process, the seismogenesis of these earthquakes, the process which produces these earthquakes, and then we need to know like how big a future earthquake can be in this region. So so that these are the basic points on which any earthquake resilient city can be idea of the earthquake resilient city can come up. So let's start with the earthquake which occurred almost like 1960. So it's 60 years now. On the same day at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So initially, the magnitude of this earthquake was given as magnitude 6. There was no observatory in Delhi, I suppose, in that time. So the magnitude of this earthquake was assigned as 6, and the epicenter was, or a hypocenter was fixed somewhere close to Palwal. The depth was considered as 58 kilometer, which is considerably a deeper earthquake in that sense. But then there was a new study which came out which suggested that this earthquake occurred somewhere close to Jhajjar in Haryana, and the magnitude was downgraded to 5.8. But then there is a recent study which is quite remarkable and which is quite, I would say, authentic, is that there was in which all the historical recordings of this earthquake by IMD at the time were used to re-estimate the magnitude of this earthquake. They recalibrated the magnitude of this earthquake. They considered all the previous earthquake. And they reassigned a magnitude of 4.8 for this earthquake. So, so I would suggest to change the title of this webinar as magnitude 4.8 Delhi Kent earthquake. Of course, as Major Bindal said, that there were 2 or 3 fatalities which occurred because of this earthquake. This earthquake was mainly, the recent study which suggested, and if you look at the paper by Singh in which this magnitude was revised, if you look at the maximum damage which occurred, this was in Delhi Camp, Gurgaon, South Delhi, that area. So that's where this earthquake occurred, and they suggested that they could not estimate the depth of this very precisely, but nevertheless they said that it's about 15 kilometers or less than 15 kilometers. So it was not as deep as 58 kilometers, because 58 kilometers is certainly unusual. Right? You are taking the earthquake to mantle, and then it's a different process which is going to be involved in the whole in the earthquake effects. So that's about this 4.8 magnitude earthquake of 1960. But then this region or Delhi region has seen many earthquakes in the past. If you look at the data of last 50 years, you see several of moderate magnitude earthquake in this region. When I talk about Delhi region, what basically I'm talking in terms of geology, in terms of earth sciences, I'm talking about a region which we call as Delhi Aravali region. Now, this Delhi Aravali region extends from somewhere in Udaipur, Mount Abu. You remember those mountains in that area, and it's the same mountain chain which extends right up to Delhi, and then you don't see it because it gets buried below Indo-Gangetic plains, and people believe, in fact, there are data which support that it's the same belt, same mountain belt which extends right up, right below the Himalayan arc. So, this we call as paleostructure. So this region has seen episodes of several geological episodes in which compression, extension, stretching of this area has occurred, and because of which there are several faults which have developed. We have several of these structures. For example, the Delhi Aravali is one. The other one is Faizabad. The third one is there is another one which is called as Mungate Sarsari. These are the ridges. These are the intraplate region of Indian plate. So here these are weak structures. These are small scale faults or mass heterogeneities, and along which some of the earthquakes occur. And unfortunately, the Delhi Aravali region, Delhi Aravali belt seems to be more active than Mungate Saharsa or Faizabad. Unfortunately, the history is not so strong for this region. If you go to Qutub Minar, then you will see that there's a description there that Qutub Minar was damaged during 1803 earthquake which occurred somewhere in Delhi. The earthquake did not occur in Delhi. The earthquake occurred somewhere in Uttarakhand, close to Devprayag and Srinagar area. But then that earthquake shook Delhi so bad that it caused damage to Qutub Minar, which is almost like 700 old structure. In fact, there was another earthquake. There's another mention in several records that there was another earthquake in 1720 in Delhi region, and Delhi, especially the Kashmiri Gate area and that close to that area, suffered a lot of damage because of this earthquake. But then there are people who say that this earthquake actually did not occur in Delhi, and it occurred somewhere again in the Walkumar region. And like the way 1803 earthquake shook Delhi badly, similarly 1720 earthquake shook Delhi badly, and that's why Delhi sustained Delhi. But we still don't have a good idea about 1720 earthquake, where exactly it occurred. So we still believe that probably it occurred in Delhi region. So that's all about earthquakes which occur in Delhi region. They're all they're not very shallow earthquakes. These are the earthquakes that are at 15-20 kilometer depth. Um, the biggest earthquake which has occurred in this region is probably magnitude 6 earthquake. Again, but the problem lies with the magnitude estimation. We saw it very clearly in case of 1960 earthquake. Um, um, when I say that Delhi Aravali, that means I'm talking about starting from Mount Abu right up to Delhi region. So there have been few earthquakes in Mount Abu region, which are of moderate magnitude, going up to 5.5 magnitude. In fact, there was another mention of an earthquake close to Muradabad in 1966, but we believe that 1966 earthquake has nothing to do with the Delhi Aravali belt, what we are talking about. The process of 1966 earthquake is sort of different from the earthquakes which have occurred in Delhi Aravali region. Well, these are typical intraplate earthquakes. Intraplate earthquakes, that means these earthquakes occur within Indian plate. They are not interplate earthquakes. When I'm saying interplate, that means I'm talking about earthquakes which occur on the contact surface between the two plates. For example, the Himalayan arc, Indo-Burmese arc, or the Andaman Sumatra arc. So that's where all those big earthquakes occur. I mean, you remember that 9.2 magnitude in Sumatra region, or the Gorkha earthquake, recent Gorkha 15 earthquake in Nepal. So those are interplate earthquakes. That's where you have huge strain accumulation. You have bigger faults. You have well-defined faults. You have well-defined structures along which these big earthquakes can occur. Fortunately, in Delhi Aravali region, we don't see such big faults. And if you see the earthquake characteristic carefully, you find there's a lot of heterogeneity in earthquake occurrence. Yes, it is possible that what we are seeing is the heterogeneity. What we are seeing is it could be because of inadequate data or inaccurate data. So the need of the hour is to characterize these earthquakes in more robust manner. And the only way to do is we need to upscale the network. There's another idea which keeps moving, that it's the Delhi region which keeps experiencing earthquakes again and again. But if you look at the map carefully, you will find that earthquakes occur all along this Delhi Aravali region. So it's only because you have probably only because you have a beautiful network of almost like 15, 16 stations close to Delhi. So that's why you are able to pick up these earthquakes. But if you go further south, the next observatory is in Ajmer, and then the next one is in Udaipur. So this whole area is actually devoid of seismological observatory. So what we need to upscale this network so that we can characterize them properly. We can understand that we can clearly see where are those faults, how they are aligned, what depth these earthquakes are occurring, how big they are, so that we can reliably calculate the MCE, what structural engineers are interested in. So that's the scenario of earthquakes in Delhi region. There's another thought which people keep saying that, look, Delhi has got threat from two regions. One is the earthquakes which occur in Delhi Aravali region itself, and then there are earthquakes which occur in Himalayan arc. And we have seen this in 1803, that 1803 earthquake which occurred somewhere in the Volcano region. Although it was not big earthquake, it was not a great earthquake. The magnitude was only 7.8 magnitude. But then, I'm sorry, the 1803 earthquake, 7.6 or 7.5 magnitude, which occurred somewhere in Devprayag and Srinagar area. So earthquake was not a great earthquake, and it did not. The rupture did not come close to the main frontal thrust or the Himalayan front. But even then, it caused a lot of damage in Delhi region. We're not sure about 1720, so I'll not talk about whether the 1720 earthquake occurred in Himalayan region, but it is quite possible. So the other threat, what people keep saying is that big earthquake in Garhwal Kumaon, which is the nearest Himalayan region in case of Delhi, and if a big earthquake occurs there, then it can cause damage to Delhi and other cities in Indo-Gangetic Plain, for example, Kanpur, for example, Banaras, for example, Lucknow. So in that sense, the seismic threat what we have in Delhi is from earthquakes which occur within Delhi surrounding region. Fortunately, so far, although we're certainly not 100% sure about it, but it looks like they're all moderate to strong magnitude earthquake, not even strong magnitude earthquake. So they are generally moderate magnitude earthquake, but please look at the population density of the region, look at the structures which are structures built up in Delhi region. Even a moderate magnitude earthquake, if it occurs in a high population density area, then even that small earthquake or magnitude earthquake is capable of causing a lot of damage. And the second threat comes from Himalayan region, where a big earthquake can actually shake Delhi quite strongly, and it can cause damage in Delhi. So that's all about seismicity, of characterizing seismicity, or whatever we know about earthquakes in Delhi. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, sir, for nicely introducing the earthquake problem in Delhi. But the way Delhi has grown over a period of time, you were staying in Delhi, so definitely Delhi is facing a tremendous challenge of developing so-called earthquake resilience in the present scenario. The type of development construction practices which we are following, if we go beyond Delhi, buildings are collapsing without any reason. We had seen in Delhi as well. We have seen in Maharashtra as well. Mumbai is famous for such type of things. So this is a big challenge for everyone who is having the interest of earthquake risk mitigation thing. So you have rightly brought out several issues. So we will take it up. There are several questions as well. So we'll take it up towards the end. So I request you to be there, so that we can now move ahead and request Professor Mahua Mukherjee Madam for giving her perspective about the challenges which we are facing for building the resilience for earthquakes in urban context. So, Madam, it's your turn now. And before I hand over it to you, a brief introduction. Professor Mukherjee is basically an architect by profession, and he is currently with the IIT Roorkee, the Institute of Technology, and she is heading the Center for Excellence in Disaster Mitigation and Management at of the institute, and she is quite actively engaged in various activities related to disaster risk mitigation through the center as otherwise as well. She has completed her Bachelor of Architecture and Master of Engineering from IIT Roorkee. Then she has completed various international courses from various organizations in Europe and other places. And she completed her doctorate on a topic related to human settlement planning and its parameters in mega cities. So this is the thing. That's why I could not find a better person to analyze the challenges which we are going to face in case of a big earthquake. In addition, before joining IIT Roorkee, she has already served various other institutes as well, like Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra, and Jadavpur University. So, with this brief introduction, I request Professor Mahua to take over and let us know your perspective about what are the challenges of building earthquake resilience in urban contexts. This is your turn.
Thank you, Professor Amir. It's a real generous introduction. I hope I can do certain justice to your selection. Let me share my contents because I have also a presentation And before I start, I would like to really thank Major General Bindal and Professor Ami to think about this particular topic. And very rightly, we are discussing in this pandemic era many different things. But probably this is something which we cannot really uh, forget. So I think this will be a very interesting sessions. So many people are here with whom we can interact, and I am really thankful that not only the panelists but also people who have joined all are so expert in this particular field of risk resilience. So that is a wonderful opportunity to have the dialogue. So my topic as chosen by Professor Amir is challenges of building earthquake resilience in urban areas. I will directly come to my outline. Urban risk, briefly I will discuss risk resilience, hazard, vulnerability and exposure and coping capacity associated challenges. And last will be the WCDM 2020 and nature-based blue-green infrastructure. So first thing first, as yes, I come from Kolkata, but right now I am in Roorkee for long. So you can say I have experience of both the skills and what we see that urban risks are actually having multi-phases. It can be the flood, it can be the summer heat, it can be the pollution, it can be the traffic jam. But today we are discussing something else. We are discussing especially the cases where engineered buildings also fail, not only the non-engineered building fail. So we have seen the type of devastation, and it didn't only happen in India. There are many different countries which is having this problem with seismicity, and we see many different type of failures. And we see the pounding, we see the liquefaction, the building is getting tilted, and definitely the parts are being collapsing. Those are the things. And that is the beauty of this earthquake resilience, that every time there is any incident, every country, depending on their resource and level of knowledge, they have added further, they have analyzed and they have improved. That's the best part of this earthquake resilience. Before coming into the earthquake resilience, the core subject, I would like to really briefly discuss few of these aspects, because when we discuss about the risk, we cannot forget the terms hazard, exposure, vulnerability, with whom risk is directly proportional. That means hazard is more, your risk is more. Vulnerability is more, your risk is more. But there is another parameter, that is the coping capacity, which is inversely proportional. So probably you will see that most of our target right now in the coping capacity side as well, very strong attention is coming. And we cannot discuss about the hazard only. From the beginning only, Major General Bindal talked about it, Amit talked about it, Dr. Gehlot also talked about it. It's not only one particular hazard. So when we talk about urban areas, it's not only urban, even the regional, even the villages, multi-hazard, wherever you are putting your people, wherever you are putting your infrastructure, multi-hazard is the parameter against which the scientists, the hazard scientists, they work. Vulnerability, I will come into that again. Primarily, there are 5 pillars for vulnerability. That is sorry, social, economic, environmental, governance, and physical built environment. Economic vulnerability is the most imminent one because it's having the most visibility, prominent visibility. But we cannot forget the social, environmental, even the governance side. And physical built environment is probably the most important one under the today's discussion theme, that is the earthquake resilience. Exposure, I will come to that again. Land use, land cover, regulation implementation. These are certain ways we try to mitigate this exposure part, and then the capacity building. Now, From 2005 to 2015, we have seen many changes in the thinking process of the disaster managers. Now we are not talking about only the disaster management, we are also talking about the risk reduction. So equally important it became that disaster preparedness, risk analysis, identifying the risk, preparedness, early warning, they are also equally important, like that emergency relief and reconstruction. And more we invest in this part of the cycle, less we have to actually invest in this part, because we will be better prepared whenever next event will happen. Our emergency relief requirement will go down, our reconstruction will be much better, and it will be planned because already our preparedness planning, resilience planning has taken care of that, where that reconstruction will happen, what are the materials, what are the construction processes. So that's the way this circle will try to close itself. It will not keep on spiraling out. Gradually, it will come improving. And we can see that different group of people, different people's group, they think about this urban risk in a different way. Hazard here in this particular global risk index, which you see from the World Bank, they talk about the frequency and the severity, exposure, population, and GDP, because it's a World Bank lens. So it depends on which lens we are using. You being at NIDM, you have a different lens. I am at an institute, academic institute, my lens is different. So exposure, they look at the population and GDP, vulnerability, mortality estimation and damage estimation, and loss calculation. And this loss calculation also offer many different parts. You people are the esteemed partner into it, so I need not to really explain it. That particular thing, that risk factor is actually having a function of age, exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity. A very small example I would like to bring from the outer part of Delhi. That is when we have to come to Delhi, we have to cross these areas, Noida, and Noida is really facing problems because Noida Bank is actually going through the sand mining a lot, illegal, but it is going on, and that actually not helping the river, because river is a natural process oriented element. It is having lots of its own ecosystem activities, and those things are getting disturbed. So what happens when we try to understand the vulnerability, we understand that these are the vulnerable areas, even this agriculture which is happening here, or these areas where the developments are happening, they are the vulnerable areas because their physical vulnerability and if the social and economic vulnerability, those parts are being looked at, then we can see it's not only Akshardham which is coming there, it is also the informal housing. So the vulnerability levels will differ. And what's about the high exposure? When we put our infrastructure, high investment, very important buildings, very important communication towers, or maybe electricity towers, and these structures, the roads, these things are now we are putting somewhere which is actually exposed because they are not being placed properly. Site selection is not proper. If the engineering is done properly, then that has to be appreciated because that is the thing probably is the contribution of the modern era, that through engineering processes we try to really sort out many of our problems, but we cannot solve all. If the hazard is from the flood side, then we can see this is the area which is actually having the risk, higher risk than the other areas if the flooding is happening. If earthquake is coming, then not only these areas will go for the liquefaction, Akshardham temple, hopefully it has taken care of all these liquefaction aspects. Its foundation has really been designed properly. But just imagine these engineered structures. If the hazard is earthquake, many of these buildings, these facilities will be under test. Where they are under the high exposure, the risk is more, but the risk is maximum when the vulnerability and exposure both are being playing at the same place physically, as well as the infrastructure and people are there. So it depends on the coping capacity, the engineering intervention in this particular place, or I will say the planning process. All these things make it reduction of the risk. So risk resilience already Professor Amit discussed, so I'm not going for that. So that's the way actually we perceive the risk, where all four are very important partners. You need to understand which one you can tweak, which one you can work from your own expert fields. What we have seen in the earthquake hazard past experiences, that not only we lost the lives, we lost properties, and we also lost very important lifeline infrastructures. And as I told you already, it's a multi-hazard scenario. During this COVID pandemic scenario, Croatia on 22nd in Zagreb, they actually had a very important, like a very, very influential, impacting earthquake. And that damaged their hospital buildings. And actually 15 or 19 patients who are the COVID-19 patients, they had to be evacuated. So these are the multi-hazards which brings sequential or cascading risk as well. And all of us already, we are quite aware about, forget about this pandemic era, in normal also, earthquake can bring that landslide, it can bring the tsunami. So many, fire is also a common cascading secondary problem out of this earthquake. Many a times these secondary hazards become the more impactful than the primary one. So we have to also think about this multi-hazard scenario. And we have the hazard science has really improved a lot. Indian hazard science improvement is at par with any standard global initiatives. We have seismic hazard microsonation maps. We have the landscape. For tsunami also, we have done so many things. We have the zonal regulations. But we are so poor in implementation, so poor in following them. How many local bodies can claim, yes, they have taken care of this microzonation information, which is so important for them to make the next master plan? That is compulsory. It has to come into our codes, building bylaws, because these are the information, these are the knowledges which is very recent and modern that has to get integrated and applied. So that is a major challenge, I will say, from the hazard part. Then I'd like to come for the vulnerability assessment. All the definitions, whatever I have used here, that is from UNDRA. I would only like to talk about two things here. That is this, you can just see the vulnerability comes like this, that loss of access, redundancy. Someone was talking, probably Professor Amir was talking about it. You have to have the redundancy plan if it is a very important hospital building, so that the people can be evacuated, ambulance can reach, police vehicles can reach. So those are the redundancy plan you have to think about when this earthquake scenario you generate. And obviously the architects are having many significant role, because it starts with the building design itself. Whether it is going to be a vulnerable building or it is going to be a safe, sound building, architects are having that responsibility. And after Bhuj earthquake, gradually Government of India could really bring so many important training courses to educate people like us who didn't get a chance to learn about these when we were students. And in today's curricula, this earthquake safety is part and parcel. That's a very important improvement. I will not say it's a challenge, rather it's an improvement. But implementation part we need to really look at. How the urban vulnerability we can assess. I worked with Dr. Neha. She was my research scholar, and we worked for this multi-hazard urban risk assessment for Dehradun. I am only highlighting the vulnerability part in this case. We have identified We have done the base data study, area data, primary data collection from that weighted ranking, and this identification of these indicators, which was also validated from the vulnerability profile of that particular city. And then the indicators came and they are prioritized. Weightage was given: social, economic, physical, urban infrastructure services, and governance. And we also come up with how to calculate this vulnerability index, because at the end we had tried to go for the multi-hazard, the risk index that we actually been able to do at the end. And I would like to highlight, as it is an earthquake-related discussion, that let's come for this housing vulnerability index, which and the infrastructure one. We took them separately because they are very important for cities like Dehradun, which is in zone 4, and that is very important. So we have identified the parameters not only from literature but also from the context of the city. Now I come for the next part, that is the, I hope you can see my full slide, that is the exposure. And in this exposure, again, UNDR had 2020 definition. Very recently, they have updated that. Exposure is situation of people, infrastructure, housing, production capacities, and other tangible human assets located in hazard-prone zones. I was showing that in my previous slide as well. So what are the challenges? Major challenge is non-integration and non-compliance of land use land cover mapping. How first? Why Kerala is facing this problem consecutive 3 years of their landslide, or because that is related to their flood, because their land use land cover has changed enormously and dangerous. We don't really incorporate, I already talked about it, the micro-zonation maps, but that has to be part and parcel for any approval process, whether it is a small building, whether it is a large complex. Resilience planning integration in master plans. Master plans are being done only for the development. But do you think we can really develop sustainably if we really omit a very important parameter, that is the risk? Until and unless we consider that parameter, we will continuously keep on putting our development infrastructure buildings, and every time it will have certain different intensity of damages, again we will redo the thing. So we are not going to actually then adhere to Sendai framework's last one, build back better. So for building back better, we need to have a proper resilience planning, which talks about risk, and it's not only disaster risk, multi-hazard, it is also the climate change risk, everything together. Regulation and code provision, as I told you, earthquake is one of the most advanced probably in the hazard science, where so many divisions has come. But can we really see its implementation in the codes or in actual implementation? I will showcase some of the construction practices which is going on in all these disaster-prone cities in India. And best practices of relocation, controlling to encroachment, then only you can control the exposure. You please need to really consider where you are putting your investment. Then only it will be a very good resilience planning. You see this bottom left image, these are the temporary structure. As they are very low in that economic vulnerability scale, so probably for the political parties, it is very easy to evacuate them and relocate them easily. But can you do that thing for Akshardham-like structures? You cannot. But you put that important investment in an area which can, in even maybe for even a 6 magnitude earthquake, can have a very important liquefaction and can get damaged hugely. So there are many different type of exercises being done throughout the world, that how to really look at this exposure. So I am just presenting one. I hope this presentation will be with you people. You just check how the population and different scenario has been generated for the earthquake, and it has been checked how differently the population will be affected if the intensity changes for a particular case. Now I come to the coping capacity. I start from the right hand side. You can see this is the one of the most beautiful thing happened for India. It is being updated regularly, and it is actually it already has the third revision, and it is taking care of all this advancement in the hazard science as much as possible. We can think about, and we do a lot of these training programs. Only thing, we need to tap them continuously. Are they practicing what they have learned? Beautiful, our children, they are actually going for the earthquake drills. I saw Hari is here, Hari Kumar from GeoHazard. They have wonderful program for this school safety. There are even our institute works a lot in the school safety programs. These are wonderful coping capacity exercises, disaster emergency kit, code revision. And the beautiful thing is when the responsible people are taking care and they are looking at the preparedness. So they are so much prepared, they're just checking whether there are any loops. So if any event happens, as I told you, that immediate rescue and relief operations will have the less burden, and our reconstruction will have lesser burden. And then again, we can actually invest more in a sustainable process, that is the mitigation and the preparedness. Coping capacity, resilience planning. And that resilience planning we cannot do in our studios, in our offices, in our expert groups alone. It is a resilience planning for a community. They have to tell you where they face problem. They have to understand a bit of this planning process, and you have to handhold them. You are the experts, you have to do that. I actually attended the GADRI, the Kyoto, the DPRI conference once, and CGDEN, Colombian NGO, they had actually come up with the 3D modeling, which we do a lot in our architectural studio, because they felt instead of this 2D planning, or 3D planning helps people a lot to understand, because they are not trained like you and me to understand the plan, to understand the changes, to understand where it is happening, that flood prone area, if the earthquake is happening, what it means, that microzonation plan, all those things they are not trained of. So 3D modeling with all this information layered to the GIS, that is a beautiful tool, and CGDEN is using it. And I would also like to bring our attention to culture. This is from Iran, because Iran has a regular issue with earthquake culture through their drama, oral traditions, folklore, traditional buildings. So many ways they bring that. Here we Indians, one thing we have done comfortably, we are forgetting our traditional strength. I do agree that traditional system construction practices I cannot practice as it is in today's urban context. But why we should not really try to understand with our this advanced knowledge body that what to be brought in, and to forget Gita's that particular idea that, oh, we are destined for it. No, Gita has also said so many other things. Why don't we believe in other things and we forget this particular thing, that we are not destined? Our coping capacity, our preparedness, our mitigation approaches, all these things can really change the dimension of the impact risk. Early warning system, Major General Bindal sir already talked about it. Yes, it's very true. IIT Roorkee, my center, is having this earthquake early warning lab, and we are really working on those seconds only. But I feel even those seconds, let's say it is the Tehri Dam issue or something happening in Himalaya, because our sensors in the Uttarakhand Himalaya zone, your Delhi will get at least 22 seconds, and that is so good for you people, because that 22 seconds for a disaster manager means a lot. Mental preparation, mental planning will start, and you can actually, when it will reach you, that intensity and that impact, you are not unprepared. You have already started doing this. So maybe initially it is the only 7 seconds to 17 seconds, only in that range, and that is also the global range. But hopefully this early warning system in the earthquake will help a lot. Here, another thing, though I have not mentioned here, that I would also like to mention, that seismic switches. That is also a beautiful facility which we can use in our mitigation. All important hospital facilities, all important police, DM's office facilities can have these seismic switches, which will fill the thing, and just like our electric fuse, it will just give the system a very strong resilience, a buffer. They will be off from the grid. So you can really make sure that your very important non-structural investments are safe. That you can. Now I would like to come for my last part almost, that the construction quality. And here I think all of us, whether I am an user, consumer, or I am actually a professional, if whatever is my role, every one of us, we can take the role, we can take the responsibility, and we can take the blame also. Can you see the structural elements? And we are teaching, we have been taught the joints are so important where the column and beams are meeting. Can you see the stirrups here? Almost non-existence. Forget about the code provision. How come I can expect that the earthquake will understand, are, ye to contractor ka paisa banana tha. It will not understand. Nature doesn't understand all these unruly practices. That's the beauty of nature. It bears. It only believes in truth and science.
Professor Mava, we have to conclude it.
Yeah, okay. And we see that what type of different discontinuity we keep on doing. So these are the different type of problems we keep on adding into it. Continuously, we are creating the new rest, and this is getting bare. You just see from outside, it will look like the column is having this size, but actually the structure part is only that thin. Last part of my, I think the last slide is this WCDM 2020. Professor Ravi Sinha was the coordinator for the last one, 18, and this time it came with the IIT Delhi. We are also partner to that. The last date of abstract submission is 31st August, but here also we are, IIT Roorkee COEDMM is a partner, and me from my own interest area, we are actually initiating a poster competition whose last date will be in September 30th or maybe even beyond that. Just give me another 2 minutes to talk about how this nature-centric earthquake risk resilience can work for us. In the response, because if you have these open, active green spaces, that can give you a space to bring the rescued people there, which is safer. And you can do the reconstruction. You have certain spaces, and the nature-based materials can be utilized, not the engineered materials, which will save the environment. Come for the mitigation. If we can really manage the slope, drainage, and vegetation, that cascading secondary impact of the earthquake will be minimized. And retrofitting, we really need to work a lot in the mitigation, in the retrofitting, where this nature-based blue-green infrastructure can be a very strong partner. And the last thing is the preparedness. The entire globe is going in a different way, and what we have done, we have just banned our timber use. Timber is such an important material, construction material for this earthquake resilience. Actually, we need to change our forest management policy. Not this one, not this one. Stopping the timber from the construction material panel. And don't forget that community resilience in the preparedness need to adhere to the natural topography and the natural problems. You need to really have a very good community participation, their risk perception, their, you have to actually communicate the risk to them. That is the best way to do the risk resilience for earthquake. Thank you. I'm sorry if I have overshoot my time.
Thank you, Pranava. It's so wonderfully presented. You have nicely explained the challenges faced by the urban areas for earthquake risk mitigation and to build that resilience, which is the core of mitigating the impact. So you have covered almost everything. So so nice of you. But as you know, that limitation with the webinars is that you have limited time. So you have to manage. Sorry for interrupting.
No. Thank you.
So-
Thank you. That gives
so-
us also clarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So nicely discussed, and there are few questions which definitely I will raise towards the end. Now we are jumping to Professor Ravi Sinha sir, who is definitely helping us in a big way at NIDM. Almost all divisions are using his services within the institute for one sort of activities, not limited to earthquakes only. So he is helping us in a big way. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting all invitations from the institute. For those who are not familiar with Professor Ravi Sinha sir is working with the IIT Bombay, and he's a trained professional in earthquake risk mitigation. He has completed his bachelor's degree from IIT Bombay, then master's as well as PhD degree from USA, and he's having very illustrious career so far, and he has been affiliated to large number of government agencies, including state governments, national government, and international projects. And few of them are he worked with the Gujarat government. He's the advisor on GSDMA, Gujarat State Disaster Management Authority. He worked for the board of earthquakes and mega cities initiatives. It's a long list. He's contributing a lot in the Bureau of Indian Standards. So I can't read out everything. So and then for his contribution in the area of earthquake risk mitigation and his professional areas expertise, professional expertise, he has been awarded various awards and recognitions. He was awarded the Career Award for Young Teachers by AICTE, and then he was having Who's Who in Science and Engineering in '98 from Mortis, and Sir Dorab Tata Technology Scholarship way back for his undergraduate courses and all these things. So Professor Ravi Sinha's interest, as I told, he's a hardcore professional working in earthquake risk mitigation, but his area of interest include dynamics behavior of structure and equipment, development and design of energy absorbing and base isolation techniques and devices, earthquake resistant design and vulnerability evaluation of structures and facilities. These are few of his areas, but as I told, he has contributed tremendously, not only earthquake but urban context as well, and he is one of the pioneers in developing that disaster master plan for Mumbai city. And results are very evident at national level that Mumbai is has already developed a resilient city. So taking a cue from there, sir, I request you to take us through your expertise and your experiences and touch upon how to build the resilience in housing and infrastructure sector. So this is the core thing which we are looking from you. With this brief introduction, I request Professor Ravi Sinha to take over and take us for around 15-20 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Amir. I would just like to share a presentation, and hopefully everybody is able to see it. I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes.
Again, thanks Amir, and thank you NIDM for organizing such a very important issue to discuss. And looking at resilience for urban areas is just so critical in so many different ways. Not just because we are having people living there in large numbers in cities like Delhi and Mumbai and others, but in many different ways, which I'm going to highlight. So what I'm going to do today in that around 20 minutes time or so is to sort of lay out a broader context, a broader canvas of what is urban resilience and what is the role in terms of what is happening in the societies around us. So if we just look at why should we worry about urban context is it's very clear that the fate of cultures, civilizations, and nations are directly linked to the fate of their cities. If we don't have our cities safe, we basically don't have our countries safe. We don't have our civilizations safe. I'll just show you some of the cities. You may not have heard of them, some of you or many of you, but these were the largest cities in the world of their times. So we have to worry that if at some point of time they were the world's largest, we can assume that that the governance of that time used to have the smartest people being associated as those who were running or advising it. So why is it that at some point of time later in the future, they were totally obliterated from the face of the earth? Obviously, smart people would not be consciously taking steps which would lead to their own doom. So there are forces, there are things which are bigger, and we have to always look at these examples and put our own current situation, that how can we learn from what happened to those great cities and to those great nations, to see that they are guiding us not to repeat the same mistakes at the current time. So Carthage, already by 300 BC, it could support and sustain a population of nearly 5 lakh people. Kaifeng in China by 1200 AD, I mean, it could support a population of 1 million, 10 lakh people. And today, where are they? They were the attractions of the entire known world at that time, had the smartest people working and advising over there. How come that the world's collective smartness was not enough to save them? And what does it tell about what is going to be the future of today's cities? So let us look at the cities today. So urbanization in 1970, I'm just showing by dots the major cities of the world, and the red dots are the cities with population of 10 million and above, and the smaller dots are the cities with lower population. So this is 1970. Now, when we come to 1990, 20 years later, you can certainly see a lot many larger red dots, and also the number of other dots are increasing. And you can broadly see the countries where it is happening. What you can see is that by 1970, there were many of these dots in Europe and China and in Asia, particularly India and China. And when you look at 2014, now suddenly you are able to see a pattern that a lot of these growths are happening in Asia, particularly in China and India, and including those so-called mega cities, the 10 million and above. Most of them are now in Asia. And the projection into 2030 is that the same trend will continue, with a lot more growth continuing, the population growth continuing to be centered in Asia, particularly in China and India. And if you look at the population growth rate, then again, these are various colors, dots showing the rate of growth. And the hotter the color, the red color means very high growth rate, and green means almost no growth. So most of the large cities in Europe and North America, for example, are not having growth anymore. But if you look at the large cities in India and China particularly, then these are the areas where most of the growth is coming now. So this was 1990 to 2014, and this is the projection from 2014 to 2030, which is the same kind of trend, that the growth centers for population are in India and in China. And for us in India, again, this comes to closing the loop that we are urbanizing rapidly, and the urban areas of the country actually define the country. And history shows that the best people of their times were not enough to stop or prevent complete obliteration of those nations. So how do we build upon that to ensure that we are drawing the right lessons as we move forward? And that's what I'm going to be highlighting some of the aspects today. So what we are finding is that 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. And 90% of that growth in urban population is taking place in Asia and Africa. And several mega cities will emerge. And all of these new mega cities are going to be in developing countries, a lot of them in India. And in the Indian context, nearly half of our nation's urban population in 2050 would live in cities which don't exist today, or live in expanded areas of current cities which don't exist today. So these are all going to be brand new areas where it's like an empty canvas, and it is for us as to collectively decide in the next 30 years what that canvas is going to be look at. So it means that it is for us to decide that, okay, is it going to be something which is going to herald a new trend? Is it going to be something which is going to be safe and sustainable? Or is it going to be something which is business as usual? So large cities generate about 75% of the global GDP. So they're not just large because of the number of people. They are large because they are the jobs over there. It is expected by 2030 or something, about 86% of the worldwide GDP would be emerging from these large cities. Which means that the future of these cities are going to be closely linked to the future of the nations where the cities exist. And also we have to recognize that many large cities and fast-growing economic centers are located in seismic-prone areas, particularly in countries like India. So the basic question when it comes to these cities is that, are the cities magnets of job and facilities, and because of that people are coming? Or is it that people are coming and because of that the jobs and other opportunities are coming? So basically, do people follow opportunities or opportunities follow people? And the right answer to these questions actually is linked to the prosperity of the society, the prosperity of the nation. So if people follow opportunities, then it is incumbent for the city to create the opportunities so that they get the right kind of people. And the way the city creates the opportunities is through the quality of infrastructure, through the quality of governance, through providing safety and security, including, of course, disaster resilience and so on. And if cities automatically become opportunities because it has a large number of people, then governance is not that important for urban areas. So the question is that, is governance important or not? That is the key question for the survival of cities. And which basically means that what will be the defining character of the great urban Indian cities, Indian urban cities during the next few decades? Is it going to be cities which created opportunities because of which people are there? Or is it that the people are there and because of that some opportunities organically grow in? So the challenges for our cities, sustainable urbanization will require the cities to generate better income and employment opportunities, quite obviously. Now cities need to safely expand the necessary infrastructure for a variety of things. And safely expand means that taking care of all possible hazards and other parameters, including, of course, seismic safety. So the cities have to ensure safety against natural and man-made hazards. Cities have to ensure access to services, reduce the number of people living in slums and other disadvantaged groups of people, and at the same time also preserve natural assets within the cities and in surrounding areas. So we have to do all of these, and we have seen from history cities which don't do so well, not only do the cities cease to exist, so do the very nations in which these cities were based. And fortunately, because these lessons have been learned from history again and again, so there are a lot of guidance available to us on what should be our broad approach. And one of the parameters is what is known as sustainable cities framework. So it can be used effectively to adapt to, mitigate, and promote economic, social, and environmental changes. And sustainable development encompasses all these aspects for a city's urban development and healthy development. And sustainable development focuses on triple bottom line. So we cannot say that one is more important than the other. All three are equally important, and they are economic and financial prosperity, social prosperity or social equity, and environmental, including disaster resilience. So a sustainable city is focus on quality of life, focus on control of emissions of greenhouse gases and all, and also focus on resilience. So as long as we are able to provide equitable and a balanced control of all three, we are doing well. If we don't, then problems would be there. Sometimes we realize, quite often we don't realize. The smart cities, which is the Government of India initiative now running for more than 5 years, is actually a very, very important step in this direction, a very positive step by the government, because it focuses on many aspects, including strengthening institutional capacity of the cities. So it is like it provides some money for enhancing physical infrastructure, but the key game changer in the smart cities mission is helping to develop institutional capacity in the cities, and that is just so important. And we should continue forward with that particular program on that particular thrust. So broadly, for cities to become smart, the institutional capacity has to be enhanced, physical infrastructure has to be improved, social infrastructure has to be strengthened, and economic infrastructure has to be again enhanced. And if we do it, then we come to the then we come to having our cities becoming sustainable through economic progress, through environmental stewardship, and through social development. And so what I'm trying to say again and again is that all these parameters, whether are so interlinked for the prosperity and survival of urban areas. And we cannot pick and choose and say that today's one aspect is more fashionable, so let us focus on that, or tomorrow some other aspect becomes more important, so let us focus on that. We need to have all of these. Any one of them being ignored is like a weak spot or like a black hole which is going to bring and destroy the entire city into oblivion. There's no shortcut to it, as history is telling us. And there's no reason to believe that today the lessons from history are not applicable anymore. So smart and sustainable cities, they require these frameworks to be used in a cohesive and complementary fashion. And the resilience to disasters is a key parameter again and again in all of them. And most cities in India will need to manage transformation to smart and sustainable cities while also continuing to grow rapidly. So the sustainable development policies need to be built on platform of resilience. And if we don't do that, then it would not really be a very good future for the city or the region. So what are the opportunities? So I told you that about 50% of the population, of the Indian urban population in the next 2 decades will live in areas which are not currently urban areas. So which will require investment. And that is a common parameter, or that is a common expectation from developing countries around the world. And in fact, there is one estimation which says that by the year 2030, the infrastructure investment, just the infrastructure in the urban areas, is going to total about 57 trillion US dollars. And most of the funds would be from the non-government funds. So most of the funds are actually going to be people's funds. borrowing from current assets, borrowing from future growth. And they would be through banks, the financial institutions, by bonds issued by various government bodies and so on. And to put it in context, the investment in the next 20 to 25 years required in urban infrastructure would be more than the total investment made in all the urban infrastructure which exists all over the world today. So, so what it means is that it's a huge opportunity to do the things right. And if we don't do it, it's also a huge liability and vulnerability which we are going to build up. And development of disaster resilient infrastructure would be the most critical factor in this entire approach. So, so if I can summarize, so today's rapid urban growth trajectory has no historical precedence, but what happens after the growth and becoming the world's largest has a lot of historical precedence. And the key point is that we need to make sure that as we grow, safe and sustainable cities should be our primary focus. And urban growth has to be managed while enhancing economic opportunities and resilience, and also reducing environmental degradation. The only option is to adopt innovative solutions that incorporate the paradigms of smart and sustainable cities. And disaster risk management in urban areas has to be looked into from this context. In places where I have been involved in urban disaster risk management planning, including in Mumbai, this also has been something which we have considered very, very closely. And lastly, Indian cities present unprecedented opportunities for resilience growth. And it is for us collectively to decide what our path is going to be, while recognizing that the path set today is going to decide the future for the next 100 years or so. If we take the right path, it's a glorious future. If we don't take the right path, history teaches us what's going to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for a nice and elaborate presentation on making cities resilient and sustainable. Definitely, there are queries coming to my mind as well as from the participants as well, but I'm just stopping myself for a while. And you have rightly gave that example of parish cities. So definitely, we also have some history of similar type in India as well. So if we are not able to control this type of haphazard development, and unless we make our cities, smart mission is going on, smart cities mission, but we have to make it resilient as well. So this is just the one thing which at the moment I want to share with you. So definitely we are going to benefit with your later part discussion as well. So thank you so much, sir, for highlighting all those things. So it's wonderfully covered all aspects of making cities sustainable and disaster resilient, especially for earthquakes and all these things. Thank you so much, sir. So now we are turning to our eminent speaker, Shri O.P. Singh Saab. O.P. Singh Saab is going to talk. Sir, are you there? O.P. Singh, sir? O.P. Singh, sir, are you there? Yogita, can you check sir is unmuted? I have just spoken to him.
Sir, he is not here as a panelist. He has to do the invitation again.
Okay. I told him, but he's saying he told me that he's there. So just
Sir,
a minute. One more.
yes, sir. So he's here as an attendee.
Okay.
Sir, yes, sir. He's here now as a panelist. You can proceed, sir.
Okay, Singh sir, can you hear me now? Sorry for this minor glitch. Singh Saab is going to join, but in between, I'm having a question to Gehlot sir. Gehlot sir, are you there?
Yes, I'm very much there. Thank you.
The question is how to enhance this level of preparedness for earthquake resilience. So lot of talk is going on. Many of us are aware about how to get prepared, but is it how to make it countable level of preparedness? Many people know earthquake safety norms. Construction भी अच्छा होना चाहिए, retrofitting भी कुछ लोग जानते हैं. But still we go for unauthorized colonies and we built our own type of houses and everything. So if in a brief few minutes you can talk about that. Just few minutes, sir.
Yeah, you actually contradicted your own statement that saying that people know the safety, they know what is required out of them, but even then they build the same kind of houses.
Yes. So this is contradictory in my opinion. Yes.
I fully understand. I fully understand. I mean, this is something which has to go away. I mean, this short-term memory which people generally have is actually a problem. That we keep forgetting whatever we have learned from 2001 earthquake, Bhuj earthquake, or Pilari earthquake, or whatever events we had in the past. I mean, our eyes are not even open to what happened in 2015 Gorkha earthquake, right? I mean, it happened which happened in Nepal. So I've tried my level best to approach. For example, I mean, the most vulnerable segment, what we keep talking is the Walcomau region in Himalaya, and I've tried my best to speak to government officials and several other people. And I think it looks like everybody waits for earthquakes to happen first. Um, rather than people have not. I mean, I'm always keep citing this example of 2001 earthquake. That 2001 earthquake, so much work has been done in Gujarat after the earthquake. Now, are you waiting for the same thing to happen in Garhwal and then you will take up the work rather than taking it up first and then rather than waiting for the earthquake. So this is something which needs to be sort of probably now it's time to have an enforcement of these building codes even on public structures, even on private structures.
Okay.
So probably we know that there are a lot of things which go on. नक्शा कैसे पास कराना है, बिल्डिंग कैसे बनेगी,
सब चलता है कल्चर सर.
हाँ वो सब समस्याएं हैं लेकिन probably the enforcement is the only way out now.
Okay, so you raised few very pertinent issues. Well, you gave the example of Bhuj earthquake, and you gave the example of Gorkha earthquake, and this is in this context we have requested the OP Singh sir to check or discuss about the level of preparedness for response. And you rightly mentioned that unless you face by yourself, you are not learning lesson. Lessons everyone is learning, but are we those lessons being reflected in our actions? So this is another challenge which I will request OP Singh sir to take us from here to talk about the level of preparedness for response. Sir, are you hearing me, OP Singh sir?
I can hear you very clearly. Can you hear me?
Yes. You are very nicely.
Okay.
Your voice is clear and sound. So, sir, you have to take us through that level of preparedness for response. And before I hand over the session to you, a brief introduction to those who are not familiar with the OP Singh sir. OP Singh sir is the guiding force, and he was leading as the Director General of NDRF few years back, and after that he went to UP Police as the Director General. In addition to that, he has been the DG of CISF as well. So, sir is having a very illustrious careers, and he's basically 1983 batch IPS officer of UP cadre, and he has been for his services and for his performance in his professional career. He has been awarded various medals, including Police Medal for Gallantry, 50th Independence Anniversary Medal, President's Police Medal for Distinguished Services, Police Medal for Meritorious Services. In addition to that, he has served in various capacities at national government level as well as state government level. So with this brief introduction, sir, I hand over the session to you to take us through your experiences, how much we have progressed from Gujarat to this Nepal earthquake. And in addition to just sir, last word, sir has compiled his experiences of he directly handled those Nepal earthquake from Government of India side, and he compiled a book on his experiences on Nepal thing. Sir, with this brief, I request you to take over and share your experiences.
Thank you, Professor Amir. Thank you, NIDM, for having organized such a productive, very professional session on quick and disaster resilience, and all eminent speakers like Professor Ravi Sinha, Professor Mukherjee, Professor Ganavati, all these people were there. So it was really nice listening to all these eminent people and talking about disaster resilience in a big way. Professor Ravi Sinha spoke about urban cities, and in fact, topic today is of urban context. So I would like to believe that cities are very important, no doubt about it. And right now, in midst of COVID-19, perhaps Indian cities, which are home to 461 million people and generating almost 63% of India's GDP, they are at the front line of pandemic also. And that is why the COVID-19 is our chance to reset and to recreate a fairer, stronger, safer, and cleaner country. And in so perhaps we can build resilience to future pandemics as well, and to other risks, the risks that we already discussed about a couple of minutes back, like climate change or extreme flood events or even ecosystem destructions and all that. India has almost 152 to 216 million people living in dense informal housing or slums. And at the same time, the spread of COVID, imagine, would have been much worse if we had faced it prior to 2014, when over 60% of our population used to defecate in the open, and when hand washing was not pushed through active communications. So these are the critical areas where we have to think and we have to ponder about it. Now, coming back to preparedness, this is a process of turning awareness of the natural or man-made disasters faced by any community into actions that perhaps improve its capability to respond to disasters. And current disasters, such as floods in different parts of our country, that illustrate the destructive potential of natural hazards as well as the long-term societal disruptions about which almost all the speakers spoke about. And it is felt well beyond the boundaries of the communities that are directly affected. Therefore, the onset of such natural disasters can be sudden, no doubt about it. The response becomes very, very crucial and very, very critical. And when you talk of response, perhaps you have to keep in mind that whether you talk of tsunamis of 2004, Nepal earthquake of 2015, or you talk of floods in different parts of the country, or Uttarakhand disasters of 2013, they all mobilized our humanitarian responses. They were all very different crises, but they all shared one common feature, and that was that each one of them highlighted the critical yet often unstructured role of emergency response team, which is very important. And disaster response is rapidly evolving. The kind of disaster response or the kind of canvas we had a couple of years back, that is undergoing a tremendous change. And that is why it is my personal belief that when we talk of disaster resilience, it's not a personal choice. We cannot afford to ignore it. What we have to do is that it's a collective imperative, and that is why we have to keep on thinking about disaster resilience time and again. Now, coming to disaster response, it is a science that involves planning, that involves the skill building, that involves exercising, that involves crisis communications, logistics, capacity building, and our ability to scale up or also shrink our resources depending on the nature and magnitude of the crisis. And that is why it involves networking and coordination of various stakeholders, be it the community at the first level or at the local level, be it the government level, local government or the state government, private sectors, public health and hospitals, whether you talk of the law enforcement agencies, fire NGOs, or specialized forces like NDRF. You talk of army, you talk of paramilitary forces, but the most possibly single dedicated force is NDRF, which contribute directly or indirectly to response and relief work. Friends, before I go to preparedness aspect of response and narrate my experiences and initiatives, let me enlarge the scope of my presentations, though it is an oral presentations, on response framework, which has a bearing on the aspects of preparedness. The basic premise of any response is that the disasters are generally handled at the lowest jurisdictional level. The community is the first responder, and major disasters require a coordinated response across agencies and jurisdictions, political boundaries, sectors of society and organizations, but ultimately it is the community which has to respond immediately. And when you talk of community being the first responder, I probably try to define certain principles which perhaps go to make the response framework. The first and foremost is the engaged partnership, which includes shared preparedness. You have a preparedness amongst all the stakeholders. You have the tiered response. The response has to be at different levels. The incidents must be managed at local level as far as possible, but help can also be taken from outside. And third most important parameter should be that scalable operational capacities. In fact, as the disasters vary in size, scope, and complexity based on so many scales, the response has to be able to expand its number of resources and speed also to meet those requirements. A very important thing which comes in the realm of disaster response is unified command. We have been talking for the last couple of years, we have been talking about incident command system, which in Indian terminology, we have converted into Indian response system. This is also being taught in various institutions, and we are trying to popularize it, we are trying to adopt it, and we are trying to institutionalize it. That is also one of the areas where the disaster response has to meet its requirement. And last but not the least is the readiness to act. Balancing the need to act with risks and hazards to the first responder is very, very essential. Therefore, while you go for the response, you have to establish your immediate priorities of public safety. You have to go for property. You think of property with ready communications plans, public information system, and so on and so forth. These are all areas where you have to go for the immediate response. Now, looking back at response strategy, perhaps the three most important pillars of effective response is how to prepare the response, how to respond itself, and how to recover. Perhaps the doctrine of tiered response emphasizes the response to incidents should be handled at the local level, which I said in the beginning. And therefore, responses need to be flexible, these responses need to be scalable and adaptable. These three qualities are important for a variety of reasons. Perhaps response operations must be flexible enough to cope with emergencies. Disasters are always dynamic. They keep unfolding, and new problems keep emerging. Say, for example, earthquakes can also give rise to tsunamis, landslides, hazardous materials releases, and even the nuclear plants, as we saw in the case of Japan earthquake in 2011. Flooding also spread so many hazardous materials. So response activities, whichever area they must address the complexities of disasters and be adaptable in the face of changing circumstances. Having said this, I would like to give my experiences as well as the initiatives from the response point of view. When I was heading NDRF, in fact, NDRF, I personally feel that NDRF is by far the best gift of National Disaster Management Authority to the nation as the most visible face of disaster management. This small organization has proved to be an orbit shifter based on the criteria of impact, uniqueness, and leverages. And a study done by IIT Delhi in 2016 probably proved it, that how in a very multi-hazardous way, in a very multidisciplinary way, the NDRF has been conducting operations in different areas of influence. Perhaps based on the experiences that I have as I used to be the chief of NDRF, and the experiences that I gathered for tackling these major and minor incidents, perhaps give me some kind of assumptions to make. The first and the foremost is that the resilient disaster response, they should be non-hierarchical. Decisions are made at the appropriate level and by those who are closest to emerging problems. While responses require coordination, no doubt about it that they require cooperation as well as coordination, they don't require so much of centralized command. And I always believe that from unity of command, as you have existing in Indian Army or paramilitary forces or even the state police, perhaps in response activities, what we have to give in is that from unity of command, it should give rise to unity of efforts. The response to 1995 Kobe earthquake in Japan was much, much slower than it needed to be, simply because local authorities were waiting for the prefectural governor to give orders, while the governor who was initially unreachable, and he was also waiting orders from the national government in Tokyo, and which were slow in coming. So you can imagine that the hierarchy plays so much of important role. NDRF perhaps is frequently lauded for its performances in disasters, and that is largely because of one reason, that the organization has always emphasized a principle of on-scene initiative. And I could see it myself during Nepal earthquake. Teams in charge of disaster response did not wait to be told what to do and what not to do. They in fact took actions on the basis of identified needs. So my own assumption would be that wanting a centralized structure or a command and control model of response perhaps flies in face of what the disaster researchers have been telling us, that the disasters are complex and the multifaceted. They require diverse set of expertise, and perhaps hierarchy is the enemy of rapidity as well as adaptability. So this is one area where we have to be very, very cautious about, and we have to make our own assumptions. The second most important response assumption that I felt should be is that the role of improvisation in disaster response. Because disaster impacts cannot be planned for in totality, disasters always create problems that were not envisioned in the response plans. So those who are involved in responding to disasters, they should know that they can and should improvise and adapt when the situation calls for. Improvisation is very, very important. And in case of earthquake, perhaps it gathers momentum, and it is very, very important. Organizational practices that confine responders to narrow roles and responsibilities, and want things to be done through the rule books, perhaps they discourage improvisations. In Nepal earthquake in 2015, a 16-year-old victim, she was a girl, she was trapped for about 12 hours, and she was pulled out alive by NDRF personnel, having extensive experience and diversity in terms of competency and perspective. We improvised shoring technique adopted by the NDRF teams, saved the victim when a 4-story mud and brick building collapsed in a heap of rubble at a site which was surrounded by precariously hanging buildings from 3 sides. And mind it, this was the first international operation in which a live victim was pulled out within a couple of hours when the Indian team landed there in the evening. We could pull out 11 live victims out of 16, and we were given the place of country in focus by the United Nations. So I feel that the improvisation involves retaining pre-disaster knowledge when it makes sense to do so, and at the same time you use ingenuity to tackle unexpected challenges. And this is very important point that has to be kept in mind. And improvisation can be done at various levels, not only in terms of employing the equipment or doing anything, in terms of logistics, also in terms of your planning, in terms of your administrations. So this is one area where the response has to be kept in mind in such a way. Third most important thing that I feel is that disaster response organizations should be learning organizations. Whether you talk of paramilitary forces or the Indian Army or whosoever is involved in the disaster response areas, particularly if I talk of NDRF, it should learn from the disasters it experiences, from the experiences of other communities as well as, and also from drills and exercises. This is very important because in order to be resilient, response organizations should incorporate these lessons into their procedures and practices. We had a great learning exercise when we went to J&K in 2014 when it was flooded by the urban flash flood. It was a great learning experience for NDRF in terms of communications network. We went there and we were totally devoid of any communications facility. In fact, the sat phones was also not working, and we could communicate to the owner that from where the sat phones were procured a couple of years back, but it couldn't be done. And then later on in Chennai urban flood, we could devise our own deployed antenna, quick deployed antenna, which was very, very handy for the communications network. And then you have the higher air mobility, which was very essential because you learn a lot. We did not lose time in case of Nepal earthquake, and we immediately landed within 4 to 5 hours of earthquake striking the country. And various other issues connected with logistics like boats or ABMs. We learned a lot during J&K flood, that how they can be maintained and how we should try to keep our own provisioning for these maintenance. Nepal earthquake also provided a great opportunity for all of us to learn in different way. The Nepal earthquake response was the first international exposure to NDRF in a massive way. Earlier also in 2011, we had gone to Japan, but that was a very small agent. Perhaps not more than 15 or 16 had gone there, or maybe 20. But this Nepal earthquake witnessed a huge contingent from side, we had 16 teams comprising more than 800 personnel with canine squads, and we could refine our operational standards and practices in midst of international teams. There were 34 countries and 76 teams, and in most of the areas we were second to none. But there were certain areas where we needed to learn a lot. Logistics, for example, the quality of tentes, the logo that we started writing. In fact, it was during Nepal earthquake that we started writing NDRF India, because nobody knew that whether we came from Norway or Netherlands. So we realized that this is a great learning opportunity, that in midst of so many international teams, perhaps we can refine and we can introduce some innovative things. So this is one of the important things that we must learn, that in this response arena requires updating of informations, trying to have a very dynamic sense of database, and updating your datas on real-time basis, and trying to learn a lot through innovations, through improvisations, through so many things. The next important thing that I would like to highlight is that the preparedness for response should be knowledge-based planning process. It is important that as it increases the chances that the community will be able to respond effectively. Perhaps related with this is that preparedness should also take care of outside the box thinking. Sometimes what happens is that some impacts that have been envisioned, perhaps they do not materialize, but other unanticipated impacts occur. You are trying to deal with one particular area, but that doesn't matter. And what happens is that ultimately the other unanticipated impacts occur. We also are forced to think that do entities that are planning to respond have significant blind spots or not. For example, in 2011, in Tokyo, in Japan earthquake, Tokyo Power Company, which owned and operated the Fukushima nuclear plants, had been informed well in advance that the plants could be disabled by a very large tsunami, but did not take steps to enact countermeasures. All the professors have been talking about disaster resilience and mapping of the area. We do not know why the Chennai airport was constructed there. In fact, during Chennai flood, when we visited Chennai, the team visited, and I was also there. When we visited there, we saw the entire airport being flooded, not only being flooded, but in fact, it was looking like a river. And there were not less than 10 to 15 aircrafts which were floating in the tarmac. They were floating inside the airport. And one of the aircrafts was totally banged with the boundary wall and perhaps got damaged. So this was the scenario, the construction planning of airport being in the low-lying areas where the floods can come and perhaps submerge the entire things. In the absence of these kinds of blind spots, perhaps the catastrophic losses that resulted might have been averted. The strategic intervention and initiatives by National Disaster Response Force in empowering the community as a first responder is perhaps an important agenda of NDRF functional parameter. And when we talk of preparing and when we talk of response activities, I would like to tell the audience here that since 2005, NDRF has trained and sensitized nearly 60 lakhs of people in community awareness programs, nearly 10 lakhs of students through social safety programs, and carried out nearly 11 lakhs mock exercises as a part of preparedness for response activities. I think this is a huge data for that, which the NDRF has been doing. We always sweated in the peacetime also, giving capacity building exercises, imparting educations and training to various stakeholders and doing it. Effective response is like empowering communities. We need to localize our preparedness and response. And we also need to give affected people greater voices and greater choices. We need to provide the communities with data on risk scenarios. We need to provide the communities with current levels of response capabilities also. And Japan is a shining example where the children are taught about how to detect and react in disaster situations. Perhaps response needs a different kind of treatment altogether because of all the elements of disaster management circle. Whether you talk of preparedness, whether you talk of um, response, rehabilitations, mitigations, I think response becomes very, very important and crucial. And it's my firm belief that India is going to be a response oriented country for another 10 to 15 years, because all the other elements they take a lot of time. You have a lot of time to go for mitigations, you have a lot of time to go for reconstructions and rehabilitations. The prevention is also very important, but that takes time, and you have to educate the millions of people. Imagine when we have trained and sensitized nearly 60 lakhs of people, but still the main important weakness that this response mechanism has, that all these stakeholders and the people, trained people, haven't been institutionalized. There is no institutionalized arrangement between the response agency and various stakeholders. So that kind of scenario is there because we have a huge population living in our country. So with this, I conclude and I say that knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Thank you so much for being a patient, for patiently hearing me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for nicely elaborating the efforts made by NDRF. Not only NDRF, that the future direction also you have shown to the participants and all of us, that unless we prepare our community, you can't have an effective response. So this is the thing which we definitely going to build upon all these things. And sir, we are definitely running short of time. There is one question which coming to my mind as well, and participants are also raising the question: how we are prepared for collapse structure such as rescue, and what are the capability of at national level for that? So this is related to earthquake, and definitely you are the best person to say something about it.
Professor Amir, I must tell you that NDRF has battalions, and each battalion has 18 teams. Each team comprises of people who are experts in various areas. They also go for collapse structures, search and rescue, urban search and rescue call. They go for flood management. They go for CBRN emergencies and all that. We have a very extensive training conducted within the house or and outside also. In fact, in good olden time, we got training from very many institutions, and we tried to develop. And when we were preparing ourselves to go for INSARAG classifications, we got training from SDC, Swiss Development Corporations. They trained our manpower and they trained our canine squad both at Ghaziabad and Orissa. And we practiced, we learned, we trained ourselves as per the international protocols and standards. And that is one reason that, why we are so efficient, not only in tackling disasters of different kinds, but also giving a new dimensions to the response mechanism. I tell you that the NDRF's response is technology-based response. You might have heard in 2016 there was a tunnel operation in Himachal Pradesh, which was done by NDRF, and in that particular operation, 2 people who were trapped for 9 days inside the tunnel, they could be evacuated and pulled out by the NDRF personnel. There have been a number. This was an incredible mission carried out by NDRF. Similarly, in Nepal earthquake, not only that we could pull out 11 out of 16 live victims, but at the same time, we employed our technological equipment in a big way. We have the systems of, through ears, through nose, through eyes, all kinds of things are there through which we try to, and we have 310 state-of-the-art equipment. Some of them are meant for earthquakes, some of them are meant for flood management, some of them are meant for CBRN emergencies. And there has been a regular, uninterrupted training going on. And in fact, still today, there are 3-4 agencies which are training the NDRF personnel in a big way for collapse structures, search and rescue, as well as for other arena. So the technological response is there. In fact, when we talk of disaster resilience, we should talk of resilient disaster response also. There should be a technology-based response, there should be mission-oriented response, there should be time-bound response, and there should be familiarized terrain-based response. So if all these responses are there, combined in a very technological, professional manner, then you try to professionalize the entire response activity. And this is what the NDRF stands for, as so far as the USP of NDRF is concerned.
Thank you so much, sir, for nicely elaborating the efforts made by the NDRF in various teams of response. So thank you so much. So as I told, we are definitely running out of time. So Professor Sinha, are you there? There is a question from the participants as well.
Yeah, I'm there.
So question, several participants are keen about the damage to the heritage structures and how to overcome that. So we have seen in the past that earthquakes are the major destroyer of heritage, like Bhuj earthquake or and take any earthquake for say. So this is the challenge which we are facing in real time. And number one, what to do and what we are doing to safeguard.
So actually, conservation of heritage is a very important matter for any country, including for India. A lot of our heritage structures were not initially built to stand the test of time. Like they were never designed and built to last for centuries and centuries, but they are, and now they are quite weak. So it becomes important to preserve them through various means. Fortunately, technological solutions are available which can take care of most of these weaknesses and which can provide the strengthening in a very aesthetic way. The challenge is that these are expensive and the technical manpower to implement them are highly limited. So they have to be done selectively. If I agree with the requirement and with the desire to save as much of the heritage as possible against threats like flood and earthquake. And we have the technology and the means to take care of that. But of course, I mean, we have to do selectively because they are very expensive to implement. And so far, if you look at the major national monuments in India, then we do not really see any efforts so far to strengthen them against earthquake. Most of these have been done to the relatively less important monuments, and perhaps it was because they were being used as a confidence building measure in the technology and in our ability to do that. But I think it is time that we need to look into the major national monuments and see what we can do so that they are strengthened against the future earthquakes and other such hazards.
And related question is that how costly it's going to be to make say any monument. This is another question from the participants.
It's very expensive. It is very expensive. Some of the studies show that the cost may be as if a particular monumental structure had to be reconstructed, then if its cost is a certain amount, strengthening the the current state of the monument in a way which is aesthetically and from other points of view, say blending with the value of the monument, the cost may be anything between 5 to 10 times the cost of the monument itself. It is very expensive.
And similar another just a small question. How costly it's going to build resilience in urban context? So we are definitely having a smart city mission going on. So how our smart cities are going to be resilient cities? This is the last for you.
So actually, I mean, that is something which we can do without much additional effort in terms of either the additional manpower or cost. Doing something like the business as usual and doing something with a smart and resilience framework overlaid, the cost difference may be at most 5 to 10% of the cost. It is not a cost issue, it is more a knowledge issue and a desire to follow that knowledge issue.
Yes. So thank you so much, sir, for nicely illustrating the concept of making smart cities resilient as well. So thank you so much. So there are several other questions as well. So, but due to this time limitation, we have to close it as well. So, Professor Mahua, are you listening to me?
Yes, Professor Amir.
Yeah, okay. So, question to you is that OP Singh sir raised that question, and this is the question which definitely over the back of my mind as well always, and participants have also raised that. So, number one, role of planning and architecture in making the cities resilient, and what are the solution for those infrastructure facilities which has already come up, like Chennai example sir had given Chennai airport, which was just like a river at that particular time. And
Yeah.
this is not the only case. We had the same case repeated in Kochi airport in 2018. And if you look, same case was repeated in Bangkok floods as well. So if we are going, you raised a multiple hazards and multi-hazard approach for making cities resilient. So if we are going for that, so some solutions for that, or your opinion about that.
Yeah, Professor Amir, in this particular case, I would like to say in our architecture planning and design, the very first thing we talk about the site selection. In the urban area, sites are restricted. So if the sites are restricted, in the Chennai case, as OP Jain sir was raising, OP Singh sir was raising that question, it is actually used to be a wetland. So it used to take care of many of the cities' wastewater, and it used to really maintain the water balance of the city. And what happened? Not only that airport has come up, but also the adjacent areas were converted into the habitable settlements. It's such a wrong practices. With our population, every time we talk about, oh, our population is like this, but it is not only about giving the people something minimal which is very unsafe. Rather, let us talk about urban facilities which gives them the quality of living, safe living. For that, what investment is required, that has to be done. Wetlands should be avoided as much as possible. If not, the proper engineering cost has to be added into it. And what the wetlands were doing there, that particular task need to be dedicated to engineered or other blue infrastructures. So the infrastructure service, which is not really part of our today's urban quality or urban planning system, but actually in any other developed country, that is the way how they define the city, not with populations. In India, we do it with populations. So that is the very big challenge with us. Huge population and giving them the safe facilities. So obviously, you are talking about this. I come from Uttarakhand. I can talk about this four lane. The way the four laning is happening, only what used to happen during monsoon or just after monsoon, that landslide and the road blockage, now is the regular feature for the entire year. So are we really doing something which is risk free, or we are adding the new risk into our built environment? So the vulnerability in this built environment, that is something where the DPR plays a very important role. Not that piecemeal, lowest cost bid. Go for the quality, pay premium for quality, because population is there. If you cannot avoid those type of sites where the exposure is very high, then you have to go for something else. Good engineering, which exists in our country very well. And I fully agree with, again, Professor Sinha and OP Singh sir, that response is also having a very important part into the preparedness. That practices are very important because people also should have certain participation. Then only this response force. Now the SDRFs are working, not only NDRFs. NDRF is much more experts trained, but SDRFs are there. They have to be trained. They also should get some good help from the community and other experts. BIM, make use of them in the urban areas. People should know where the facilities lies, where to intervene, where to stop, so that the entire city doesn't get affected. Only the pockets can be closed.
So there are technologies, we have to really make use of them. We have to bring it in our planning. We discuss a lot, but implementation-wise, we don't get that much opportunity, I can say, from the architects and planners side. We are having that expertise.
So thank you so much for nice explanation of the issues. So ultimately, what I can conclude is that as Gehlot Sahab was asking that I'm asking a contradictory thing in the first question which I asked him. So this is going to be, as you rightly mentioned, that people are aware, people want to contribute as well, but due to certain things, people are not able to come out with those solutions. So we have to debate again on all these issues, that why we are failing in implementing all those things which are already in our knowledge of domain of our knowledge. So yes, please go ahead. Just be brief,
just only one thing I would like to say. In our entire process, economy and finance, that gets importance. That attitude has to be changed. Quality, that target has to be different. And for that, not only the smart cities, but also our GPDP, the Gram Panchayat Development Program or Plan, that is such a wonderful tool. But we just use it for the fiscal planning. But finance is not the first thing or the last thing in development. So GPDP can have a very important component of this spatial planning, where the community comes in and they can actually be a very strong partner in your resilience mission of the settlement.
So thank you so much, Professor Ramugwa, for nicely elaborating everything. So OP Singh sir, this is the last request to you to just give your concluding remark as brief as possible, sir.
We had been discussing about disaster resilience. It's a wonderful concept, and coupled with this is the smart city program. All the disasters, they have to be thought of. The planning has to be done at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. Of all the elements of disaster management, be it the preparedness or mitigation or response or rehabilitations, the things that have to be kept in mind is that the planning has to be at the grassroots level, and the people should be made aware of everything. After all, unless you are aware of institutions, unless you are aware of the plans, perhaps you cannot succeed. So each and every man has to be aware of that. Each and every man has to be trained, sensitized, made aware of the disaster management plans, policies, and the pitfalls. This is very important. The pitfalls have to be known. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses of the community? What would be the planning process? What would be the scale of participations? What would be the role of the volunteers? What would be the district management plan process? What would be the role of the civil society or the local actors? All these things have to be kept in mind. And unless the nation is aware of all these, a nation cannot become a resilient nation. So resilience has to be in the mind, in drilling in the mind. It has to be drilled into the mind, as Japan has done it in case of its own population. Similarly, I tell you one thing, there is a very beautiful example of Vietnam. In Vietnam, they have gone in for older people's movement. They not only take care of the older people, rather they are being mainstream in the whole arena, and the younger and younger population is getting inducted in that movement, and they try not only to take care of the older people, but they also try to contribute significantly, because they are the ones who are sitting idle, so they want to contribute. So my whole argument would be that disaster resilience cannot begin unless you do it in your own way, and start from the day, start from your home, start from your community, start from your society, and end up to the nation at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for very nice words and nicely concluding the thing. May I request Professor Ravi Sinha Sahab as well to give last brief comments, closing remarks.
Okay, so actually, I mean, this is a very topical issue, how to look into the urban context of disaster risk management. Already all the speakers have pointed out that this is not business as usual. There are very special features which make an urban area. And because of that, it requires a special handling in various ways. I would just like to highlight two key points which have come up over here in various ways in the discussion today. The first key point is the importance of planning. And the second key point is the importance of innovation or thinking and decision making at the appropriate level. So these have to be important features which has to be embedded in our work culture in order to be able to be more effective with disaster risk management. That's all I would like to say quickly.
Thank you so much, sir. Nicely concluded. Gello, sir, are you there?
I'm there, but I think the video cannot come because of.
It's okay. You want to say a few words as closing remark?
I guess OP Singh Sahab has summarized this nicely, and I think I have nothing else to add. But I mean, the only thing is that probably our understanding of the process which caused these hazards needs to be upgraded. I mean, that's something that's a scientific issue which needs to be upscaled, which needs to be the network needs to be upscaled. So that's, I mean, from my side, this is the only thing which I can add.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And Professor Paul, last word if you have. Otherwise, we will go for closing. Yeah. Professor Mahua, no, you are not audible.
Yeah, I think very rightly pointed out, young people and the old people, that connect and the innovative ideas.
Okay.
But don't forget the community, because what community can bring, that is unparalleled, because they know their terrain best. That is.
So thank you so much, Professor Mahua, and the entire panel of eminent speakers. So this is the opportunity to just to thank the panelists. OP Singh sir, thank you so much for kindly agreeing and giving the proper perspective of not only the response but how to build the resilience. Professor Ravi Sinha is always a constant source of inspiration. So thank you so much, sir, for giving your perspective about building the resilience in urban context, as well as summarizing the thing. Professor Mahua, you are always a good friend, and it's always a pleasure to work with you. So nicely summarized, nicely giving everything. Your presentation was appreciated by participants, and your intervention was very good about that planning perspective and all these things. Galot sir, thank you so much for kindly agreeing and giving your perspective about Delhi earthquake. So thank you for all the panelists. In addition to the panelists, I would take this opportunity to thank the NIDM team, including our executive director, who has been kind enough to encourage us for taking up these issues like this urban resilience. And thank you, sir, for gracious to be present in the inaugural part as well and give your perspective about the urban resilience, giving those examples from Delhi and other cities. So thank you, sir. And in addition to other NIDM team members, especially Yogita, who is coordinating everything behind the scene. And thank you so much, Yogita, for nicely conducting the program. And you are one of the force behind the successful completion of this course. So since very beginning, you are helping this team and the entire NIDM team, including technical support, administrative support, and all of us. Thank you so much. I take this opportunity to thank all participants whoever are present this far. So thank you all the participants, all the panelists, my team at NIDM, and all of us. Thank you so much. It's wonderful participation from all of us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
We are just going to close the meeting. Nikita, you may close the meeting. Thank you so much.
Sure, sir.